Leadership is hard. Titles change overnight, expectations pile up fast, and nobody hands you a survival map. That's why Leadership on the Rocks exists. Hi, I'm Bethany Reese, leadership coach, author, and speaker. And for 2 decades, I've been equipping leaders to navigate the wild, unpredictable terrain of leading people. Whether you're a new leader trying to find your footing or a seasoned leader trying to reclaim clarity, this podcast gives you the tools, truth, and encouragement you need to thrive in both your professional and personal lives. Each week, I sit down with leaders who have weathered storms, climbed mountains, and learned what it takes to lead without losing yourself in the process. If you're ready to build steady, grounded, life-giving leadership, this is your place. Let's climb together.
Great leaders set the banks of the river and then let the water flow. We set the banks, we set parameters, we set structures and processes that we will utilize, but then don't try and micromanage the flow of the water. We know without banks, our efforts will sprawl everywhere. The water will go everywhere and not be focused or directed. But when we can put banks and then let good people do good work within that, man, that is powerful. We're harnessing the power of that river all moving in the same direction.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Kurtis Hewson about how to build a culture of collaboration, because real growth happens when leaders move from me to we. Kurtis Hewson has been an award-winning teacher, vice principal, and principal, as well as taught at the post-secondary level. With over a decade of experience as an administrator, Kurtis has championed the call for collaborative structures in schools to ensure success for all students. In addition to 2 finalist awards from Alberta Excellence in Teaching Program and Edward Parr Award recipient for excellence, in his first year of teaching, Kurtis was an honoree for the ASCD Outstanding Young Educator Award in 2010. Kurtis is one of 5 Alberta principals featured in Reflecting on Leadership for Learning, case studies of 5 Alberta elementary school principals, addressing exemplary leadership practices in elementary schools in Alberta, and he is the co-founder of Jigsaw Learning, a co-author of the best-selling text, Collaborative Response, 3 Foundational Components that Transform How We Respond to the Needs of Learners, and currently works with districts and schools nationally and internationally, establishing collaborative response frameworks and interacting with thousands of educators annually. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Kurtis. We're so excited to have you.
Oh, thanks so much, Bethany. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Man, well, I got to tell you, so my listeners are all over the world. We have a big following in Europe, and they're not all educators, but they know me, and they know I used to be an educator, and they know I love to bring educators on. And here's the reason why. Guess who are the best teachers, especially about leadership? Educators. And so you are all into this collaborative space. And I got to be honest, what I have found in my own experience, and my husband's in business, and what he's experienced in his business is getting people to talk and work together is one of the hardest things you will ever do as a leader. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, absolutely agree. And Bethany, you're right. Even though my primary experience has been through education, I've also worked with not-for-profit and profit sector as well, because the leadership lessons that apply in the schoolhouse can apply in the boardroom as well. So I'm really excited to speak to you about this.
Man, well, I'm so excited. So first of all, let's just dive into the concept of collaboration. What do you mean by that, and why is it important?
Yeah, so to me, I think we have to get past the understanding that in order to work together, we have to get along really well. We have to play nice. And I'm not suggesting that we have to create conflict or tension in our organizations, not at all. But I do believe we have to move from collegial relationships to collaborative relationships. And what I mean by that is when we're collegial, we help, we support, we look out for one another, but we may not be comfortable questioning. We may not be comfortable asking hard questions. We may not be comfortable getting uncomfortable for us. I think when we look at true collaboration, we understand that it is really centered in being somewhat uncomfortable, because I'm going to challenge other people's perspectives and they're going to challenge me, not as personal attacks or professional judgments, but rather how can we utilize the collective mindset to that that really becomes that the room is smarter than any one person in the room. And to do that, we have to be comfortable saying, what if? I wonder if, I like your perspective, but I'm wondering about this. And to do that well, I'm a big believer that it doesn't just happen because we'd like it to happen. It happens through really intentional structures and processes that we put into place. So that's been a huge learning for me in almost 3 decades now of doing this work, that without structures and processes in place, it's really hard to get really robust cultures of collaboration established.
I love the expertise that I'm already hearing from you because you're already really exposing. Let me be the first to confess. I am from the United States and I'm from the South in the United States, and we are so nice. We are not kind. We don't always say the things that need to be said. We're so nice that we will bury the real conversation that needs to be had. And so there can be this misconception that, oh, everybody's getting along, we're collaborating. And I love that the first question, you are calling that out. And I'm like, hang on, this is about collective mindset where we're having lots of conversations, asking lots of questions, and you have to be, comfortable with the discomfort of that. And
Yeah.
that immediately tells me that I need to look for the facade, that if everybody's playing nice, chances are we're probably not truly collaborating. So thank you for calling me out immediately on that, because I think the reality is a lot of people say, oh, yeah, my team collaborates. Your team's probably just really nice.
And you know what? I've often heard teams say, we already collaborate so well together. Why would we want to put in some of the structures and processes that I teach and talk about? And my response is, oh my goodness, if you're collaborating well now, we're about to pour gasoline on a fire by putting in some parameters. What you were able to accomplish in 60 minutes, we're going to be able to do so much more in 40. And isn't time the resource that we all wish we had more of?
Man, I love that. So, I know we're going to get into the structures and things. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but I want to start with the leader's role first. What is the
Mhm.
leader's role in building that collaborative culture? Because collaboration doesn't happen by accident, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a messy process. I love that you call out the mess in it. So, what leader mindsets and behaviors? What's our role in really supporting that collaborative environment and culture?
Okay, so I think there's two sides to this. Um, One is certainly more technical, the other one's more of the art. Um, I'm a big believer, and I heard this years ago, and it always stuck with me, that great leaders set the banks of the river and then let the water flow. And what was meant by that was we set the banks, we set parameters, we set, again, you're going to hear this over and over, structures and processes that we will utilize, but then don't try and micromanage the flow of the water. Um,
Mm,
we know without banks, our efforts will sprawl everywhere. The water will go everywhere and not be focused or directed. But when we can put banks and then let good people do good work within that, man, that is powerful. We're harnessing the power of that river all moving in the same direction. The second side of this, so as a leader, I think you are responsible for setting the conditions for how we collaborate. The things like establishing norms, establishing roles when we meet, creating clear purpose. All of these things that, again, when I work with organizations, I'll often hear it feels a little bit mechanical or contrived when we start, but if eventually we reach a place of, wow, these these elements are really helping us get way more accomplished than we ever could before, and to engage in a certain way with one another that is necessary and understood when we're collaborating. The second side of this is we know that high levels or high impact collaboration involves trust and vulnerability. So I think as a leader, you have to model that. You have to go first and to be able to show that you're vulnerable, to show I was misaligned in my thinking here, but here's what I'm understanding now. When people can see you saying, I don't quite understand this in the way I'd like to, help me, we're showing that vulnerability and modeling it for others, that we're not the leader that you put on a pedestal and just assume things must be going perfectly if you're leading us. No,
mhm.
every one of us have deficits in our thinking. We have blind spots that we have in place. And I think as a leader, if we can demonstrate and show that, we're creating those conditions to establish really high levels of psychological safety in our organization.
Man. It's so good. I'm such a visual thinker. I love that you gave, we are the banks of the river. We don't control
Yeah.
the water, but we put the banks there to contain it and then let the water flow and do what it does. You know, water can flood, and when it floods, it actually causes disasters. You want
Yeah.
it contained within the banks of the river. I love that so much. And then the next one of just modeling the behavior that it takes to be a collaborative partner. To go first and be vulnerable and to share. It's such a good thing. So often leaders are the temperature gauge. You're setting the temperature by modeling what you're doing. That's such a great example. So thank you for sharing this. That's the leader's role. Now let's talk about, now we're trying to get the team from cooperation, right? We're all playing nice, we're cooperating, but to actual true collaboration. You've mentioned this several times of just you've got to have the structure around it. So now we're ready. Let's dive deep. What are some structures that we need to improve the true collaboration on our teams?
Absolutely. So, Bethany, have you ever heard anyone remark that, ugh, I wish we could get rid of meetings, or, ugh, that was a 60 minutes that I will never get back in my
Does
life?
does it count if I've said that a ton of times?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think what is being expressed there is not frustration of coming together, it's without having clear purpose and focus. We know that when we've been in really high impact collaboration, the time flies like that. And I've seen people who were not that open to working with colleagues, but it was because of experiences I think that they'd had in the past. I've seen those same people say, please do not eliminate the time that we have to collaborate. If we're truly collaborating, we have to meet. We have to.
Mhm.
So, how do we set up the conditions that when we meet, we are focused and purposeful? And I found a number of things have to be established within that space. And I engage with organizations in establishing this. In our own organization, Jigsaw Learning, we live this as well for ourselves. So, the first thing is when we meet, is it clear what is the purpose? And sometimes it is um, even as much as right at the top of the agenda, we're going to put why does this team come together? Now, if it's a team that meets on a regular basis, so for instance, in our own organization, we have an engagement team that meets essentially monthly. We've written right at the top of the agenda, why do we meet? What's our purpose? What are we trying to do? And it's more than just achieving the goals in a strat plan. It's we meet because of this purpose. When I work with other organizations and particularly schools, there's often lots of different meetings happening. One of the first things we do in schools is start naming the meetings, and usually that's not a problem. They usually have, and usually it's an acronym that goes
Mhm.
with it, but then get crystal clear on what's its purpose, what is its focus, why does it exist, who's involved, getting really clear. So in any organization, getting that clarity of purpose. The second piece that I would say is critically important is you can't be a team if you have not articulated norms. And what I mean by norms, and we've seen people call these their collective commitments or rules of engagement. I have to be honest, when I first heard of the concept of norms, I thought that must be for organizations where people don't like each other very much, or the organization is so big they don't know each other. In
Mhm.
my in my school at the time as a principal, no, we love each other. We get along so well. We don't need norms. And we didn't when our conversations were surface level. We could get
Mhm.
along. But as soon as we started to get deeper, we needed to say some things out loud, such as, we will solicit and value the opinions of everyone at the table. We had to say that out loud. We had to say, we agree that we will arrive on time and prepared for our meetings. And then we had to discuss what does that look like when we do that?
Mhm.
What would we see when we're putting these in place? So being able to co-create those with the team, and then when we meet every time, let's pick one that we're going to focus on or practice. So, for instance, I've worked with lots of different teams where one of their norms, this one almost always comes out, that we will be solutions focused.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
That one always comes out. And so today, when we're meeting, all right, let's practice that. When we're solutions focused, we should hear the words what if often because we're trying to solicit different possibilities. So, Bethany, your job today, your role is on a post it note, keep track of how many times you hear the words what if. We're striving for at least 10. And by the way, the team that I met with yesterday, they were able to get 16. So let's try and beat them. So it can be fun little things like this, but
Yeah.
we're getting really explicit on how
Mhm.
we behave. And even just the what I shared there of today, your role is to tally. I would be in every meeting establishing what are the consistent roles that we will take on. And so, for instance, when I was a young leader, I thought I was doing everyone a favor by taking on all the responsibility for the conversation and just everyone else just come ready to engage. That's my expectation is that you'll be engaged in the conversation. And I realized by me being the one who's facilitating the conversation, watching the time, taking the notes, I wasn't doing any of those jobs well. I'd miss
Mhm.
things that were being said because I was trying to ensure that this person was having a chance to voice their ideas. All of a sudden, someone would turn and say, "It's been 20 minutes. Are we ready to move on to the next thing?" And go, "Oh man." So getting really clear of, all right, in this meeting, who's facilitating? Who's our note taker? Who's
Mhm.
our timekeeper? And then we've seen other organizations start to infuse other roles, such as the norm analyst, where it might be that person's job at the end to be able to say, all right, give us, Bethany, you're our norm analyst. Just take a couple minutes and tell us how did we do on the third norm that we have that we will we will support um, critical thinking when engaging in conversation. How do you think we did with that today? So getting crystal clear. I've even seen organizations where they'll have table stands. I wish I had one here that I could just show on screen, where it was little stands that would stand right in front of the person, or tent cards, where the front side shows this is my job in today's meeting. The back side reminds me what do you do when that's your job. So
Nice.
these simple things are, I'm just scratching the surface of,
Mhm.
again, structures and processes that we can put in place for us. And again, the idea that as a leader, I'm going to practice loose, tight leadership, meaning I'm going to be tight on certain things. Like if we're a team, we have norms. That is just what we do. We have purpose stated right at the top of our notes and agenda. We have an agenda that is clearly articulated for us. What I'm loose on is the conversation that happens within it.
Yeah.
There's a great quote by the poet T.S. Eliot, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but he says that without tight parameters or tight structures, the mind can go in every which direction. When we have clarity in how we're engaging, this is when we can unlock the most creative and innovative ideas because our
Mhm.
mental capacities are not being spent on how much longer is he going to talk? Are we moving to the next part of the
Yeah.
agenda? This person's on their phone. Is someone going to address that? Or we're
Think about
just
how
focused.
that aligns with your river analogy of why the role of the leader is to set those banks.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's such power in moving water, right? It can generate electricity that then powers so many other things. But when it gets out of its banks, and if our thoughts are allowed to just run free, it can cause massive damage to the relationships, but definitely to the work because we're now flooded with lots of other things that don't serve the purpose. But when we are contained within the banks of that structure, then man, you've got a lot of harnessed power that you can use. I love it. So
So
just go
let
ahead.
me give just a quick example of this too. If you and I were in an unstructured meeting, conversation at the table, and I was to say, Bethany, the idea that you just expressed, I'm wondering if we could maybe look at it from this perspective. Now, if you and I had a solid relationship, then that's probably going to be okay. But I've been on teams where that might take as a personal hit to somebody. But if we've said that we will question one another when engaging in conversation and made it
Mhm.
super explicit, and then as a leader, I'm modeling it, I'm practicing it, we get to a space of, no, I'm not asking you a question because I disagree with what you're thinking. I'm asking a question because we said that's what we do. We ask
Mhm.
questions.
Yeah.
Getting really explicit is critical to the unlocking that collaborative capacity of a team.
It's so good. And going back to the point of structure, right? You talked about purpose, norms, and roles, how important they are. Without that, a lot of people think, well, then you have a system that you always have to, ensure. Now it becomes another list of check boxes. you're forgetting the importance of the system. When you're focusing on the smaller tasks and not realizing the why, is we don't naturally come with these behaviors of how to engage in collaborative work. We are very
Hmm.
selfish in our hearts and minds. And, you have different personalities. You may have the Bethanies that I want to be the talker all the time and I want to share my ideas. But then you have, I don't know, the Susies over there who I need to think on this before I reveal what I'm truly thinking because I'm a processor. And then you have the person who, well, you didn't give me a heads up on what we're talking about. How can I develop an opinion? Now they're mad. You have all these dynamics that are naturally all the psychology coming in.
Yeah.
And whenever you implement these structures, it's not because you're trying to control everything. You're trying to build the habits of how we engage collaboratively.
Bingo.
And I just love it. I love, purpose. Why the heck are we meeting? Everybody thinks that. Why
Yep.
not spell it out? We don't meet. We don't waste your time. We value your time. We're not going to meet unless it has a clear purpose of what we're doing. And here's how we're going to engage. And so I just love it so much. It's building those habits. And I think people have got to remember when you have structure, it's not about the structure that's important. It's about building the habits that leads to the outcome that you're wanting that's
Great
important.
insight.
If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. And also, please rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership. And through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. Now, back to the show. So, as we talk about it, we're diving deeper. We've now established the leader's role. We've talked about, okay, collaboration. How do we cultivate that? You talked about structure and purpose and roles and norms. And now let's talk about why are people coming together? So many things happen. It doesn't really matter the industry that you're in, whether it be education or healthcare or business or whatever, or maybe it's the utility space. Like things are happening. You're constantly dealing with number one, we need to improve. Whatever it is, you're out there to improve it. I mean, that's why you come to work to serve and improve. But then you also have problems, conflicts, and constraints. And so you talk about with your collaborative response, responding and reacting. Can you dive
Mhm.
into what do you mean by that, where you have that collaborative response instead of reactions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the collaborative response framework is definitely more complex than what we're going to be able to get into in this conversation. And again, I primarily work with schools around this, but I've also engaged with other organizations around just their solid collaborative practices. And first, we start with setting up structures and processes. Then, what we want to do is when we get into opportunity, where when we're meeting, and whatever the frequency of that looks like, and again, getting the clarity around the purpose. When we meet, how we design that agenda is critically important for us because I want to ensure that there's clarity. And if it's a team that's meeting on a regular basis, like most teams are, I want predictability in what does the conversation look like
Mhm.
for us. So let me give you just an example of what this can look like for a team. And we've discovered a really powerful process that can truly unlock the collaborative capacity of the team that moves to proactive rather than reactive situations. So let's picture that we are a team that meets on a regular basis, and let's for interest sake say that we're a marketing team that are coming together, and really it's about promoting the work that our organization does through our marketing efforts. Okay. So we come together and we establish the roles that we're having for this conversation. And usually, once a team gets good at this, this is even predetermined or done very quickly.
Mhm.
Then we say, all right, there's our norms. You can see them there on the agenda. Bethany, which one would you like to focus in on today? And I do this with our own team as well, is we'll pick one and say, this is what we'll focus in on. And then usually at the end of the meeting, we'll say, how do you think we did on that? Or maybe I'll come prepared with the norm I want us to focus on. We're not going to read the norms word by word,
Mhm.
but we're going to just take one that we'll focus on. And again, this doesn't have to take a lot of time. It ends up being very quick. Then what we want to do is start with celebrations. And what I
Oh.
mean by this is we're going to start, and everyone is going to be prepared. Our team is always now, they know the questions coming. They know the structure of the agenda is the exact same every time. So they're prepared. And so, for instance, I'll even talk about our engagement team that we have, which is um, creating our promotional efforts, our marketing um, tactics, I guess, for lack of better word. We always start with celebrations, and this is where someone will jump in and say, I'd like to celebrate that we've seen our podcast audience grow significantly this quarter. And we go, awesome. That is great. And then the most critical question that we ask is, what did we do that led to that success? Okay. When I'm in a school and a person comes into a meeting about students and says, I'd like to celebrate Patricia. I've seen such a growth in her reading over the last month and a half. Then we're going to say, awesome. What do you think you did that led to that success? What we're trying to do is get really clear on what is it that we're doing that's having impact. And when someone says, I don't know, it's a miracle, we again want to come back and say, okay, but what do you think you did that led to that miracle? Let's keep coming back. This is building high levels of collective efficacy over and over again. And collective efficacy is that idea that we know we are doing things that are having impact, and we even have evidence of that.
Mhm.
Now, our team has gotten really good to understand that when we bring these celebrations, it's based on data sets that we have in place, and we get crystal clear on what do you think it is that we did, because maybe we can replicate that in another area. Or someone at the table, when this person says, I set up my copy in this type of a formula um, with that last promotion that we did that really seemed to take off, then someone in that room goes, interesting idea. I could learn from that. So we're learning from that celebrations. I say to teams, if you're meeting, don't skip celebrations, even if it's just
Mhm.
5 minutes.
So good. I feel like you're hitting the nail on the head. We are such emotional, psychological creatures, and we don't tap into that often enough. And I do feel like I don't know, maybe it's just things going on in society, maybe it's social media, I don't know. But whenever I work with teams, everybody feels so overwhelmed and just negative.
Yeah.
And they watch the reels that start off funny, but really it's embedding and continuing to feed a negative monster. John Gordon would say, "You're feeding the negative dog here instead of the
Yeah.
positive dog." And so, in thinking about that, by starting off with celebrations, what you were talking about, that efficacy is building my belief that I matter, that I'm making a difference.
100%.
And it is so important, and we can skip over that way too often. But at the core of a human being, I want to matter and I want to make a difference.
Absolutely.
Nobody wants to show up and suck at their job. They want to come and do good work and make a difference. And by just adding in, you said 5 minutes. I want to say that again. You said 5 minutes of your agenda. And
Yeah.
but what it's doing has such a bigger return on investment and ROI than you can ever believe, because you're tapping into the core of the human that are, of the humans on the team. You matter. You're making a difference. Look at this. Let's celebrate it and let's try to replicate it. Oh,
Absolutely. So
excellent.
then, one of the agenda structures that we found has been incredibly impactful. And again, it started in schools. And as a former educator, I know you've been in conversations where somebody says, we have to meet about Jackson. And everyone in the room goes, ugh. Uh,
Yeah.
this is a conversation we know is going to go off
Mhm.
on tangents and whatnot. We found the same in other organizations of sometimes we get in conversations and we start to spiral and spin.
Mhm.
Listen to this process that we've found to be incredibly important. And again, we utilize it within our own organization. So when we're building out the agenda, we get crystal clear on what are key issues that we want to be able to look at today. So this started in schools where we'd say, don't bring Jackson to the conversation. What's a key issue you're experiencing for Jackson? And get really clear and succinct. And this is often hard for people to get super tight and clear on what is that key issue. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to work with my engagement team. Our key issue is that we are seeing our Instagram impressions starting to drop. Okay. There's our key issue. That's something that we want to address. Now, usually I want to have it clearly connected to what part of our strat plan is this
Mhm.
conversation impacting. If it's not about our overall organizational growth, it might not be something that we need to talk about as a team, or we might be talking about something that doesn't really have significant impact on our overall direction that we're going. Okay, so we bring that key issue. Then we say, all right, everyone, take 2 minutes and just write down what are some possible solutions, things that we could consider. Just don't say them out loud yet, just write them down. This allows the people who need process time, rather than us coming in to say, here's the problem. And all of a sudden, Bethany jumps in and goes, oh, I've got 30
Hmm.
ideas for this. And the person who kind of like sinking to the back has just been given permission to
Yeah.
kind of pull out of this conversation. So we say, all right, everyone write down possible ideas that you have for this. Then we turn and say, Nadine, can you set an 8-minute timer for this conversation? And we say, all right, go. Everyone, what are possibilities? And we start brainstorming. We start riffing off each other. I usually like to call it conversational jazz because you come up with an idea and I say, ooh, I like that. What if we could consider this? And during this time, there's no evaluation. No one
Mhm.
can say, oh, we've tried that before, or no, I don't think that would work. If you're thinking that, keep it in your head. But right now, we're just throwing out possibilities and ideas, and we create that list. And then when the timer goes off, whatever that time is that you want to put towards that, we say, all right, from this, what should we do? Let's get really clear on the actions, who's doing it, and what's happening. And then when we come back next time, we're going to review what did we try, what worked, what didn't. But we find through this, it gets everyone's engagement increasing. And as a facilitator, I often don't say, all right, who has an idea? I get really direct and say, all right, Tanya, you start us off. What's one thing that you're thinking? Love that. What do you think, Bethany? And then someone else will jump in with another thing. When I notice somebody slipping into their phone, I come back and say, all right, Marcus, what's an idea that you wrote down as a
Mhm.
possibility here for us? And again, people now know that this is the way that we engage in these collaborative conversations. It's predictable. They know what's going to come. In fact, lots of times they'll see the conversation points that we're going to have, and they've already come ready with some possibilities and
Absolutely.
ideas. And so
People, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say what this does is it totally shifts our focus to being solutions focused and then action oriented as a
Mhm.
team. And it unlocks the best ideas from each and every person in the room. And when somebody says, yeah, my last job, one of the things that we tried was, oh, that's genius. We create the space that allows us to open up everybody's um, innovative thinking, which is really powerful for again, the room is smarter than any one person in the room.
Absolutely. Going back to this, people thrive under structure. When they know what to expect, they can
Yeah.
bring their best game. And so often we don't provide that for people. And I don't know why. People thrive under that structure. But another key issue that I'm picking out, there's so many nuggets of wisdom, guys. You're going to have to listen to this podcast twice, this episode twice. You're talking about what's the key issue. You're immediately, as the facilitator, as the leader, saying there's a whole bunch of things happening, going around, a bunch of noise. We're concerned what's most mission critical about this. What is a key issue? So you're immediately giving permission to. I know there's a lot of things that we could talk about, but not everything is of equal importance. This is a key issue. Let's dive into it. And then again, going back to you're allowing everybody to have time to process and think. Everybody's bringing something to the table now. And so you're providing that. But then also the trust and vulnerability piece you mentioned earlier about what leaders need to model. And here, guys, I want to say leader is all of us. We all have influence. And, you can so often be the leader in the room, whether it be because of your experience, your insight, or the fact that you're facilitating, even though you're not the big boss with the title and the paycheck, right? You're still a leader. And so,
See, and the beauty of this is when you set structures, we could come in today and say, all right, who wants to facilitate our conversation today? It doesn't have to be the person with their name on the office door. We all understand and create predictability that someone else we can say, okay, well, you facilitate
mhm.
today because the process is so clear for how we engage with one another.
It's so good. And it builds up that muscle of leadership that everybody needs,
Yeah,
right? Everybody needs that. And just looking at this, you talked about, you didn't say it per se, but you did, the brainstorming, how you set a norm for that of we will not bring evaluation and judgment into this conversation because we're
absolutely.
creatively problem solving. We're going to brainstorm. We're going to have a bunch of ideas that are shared and they're not all going to be winners and that's okay. But if I have my, first idea, it's going to prompt you to an idea, then it's going to prompt, Susie over here. And before you know it, the fifth idea is the winner, but we never would have got there had ideas number one, two, three, and four been allowed to be shared without judgment and evaluation. And that is
I
such an important move.
I had heard a stat once that when you're getting into really creative spaces, that it's usually the 12th to 14th idea that is generated that becomes the nugget. So we oftentimes even set out the expectation of we're going to set a timer for this, but our ambition is to get at least 10 possible solutions for this. And I've also then worked with organizations. We've done it within our own. I did it in my own school where we set out a locus of control activity where we said, all right, what are all the challenges that are getting in our way? Write them down, put them on post-it notes. Let's write them all down, and then we're going to create two concentric circles. So if you're watching this, you'll see that I'm drawing in the air. The middle circle is going to be what is in our control. Okay.
Hmm.
So the post-it notes that are absolutely in our control, they go there. The next ring of the circle out is what's in our influence. What are things we could
Ooh.
influence potentially? And then the outer ring is what's out of our control. So let's go back to that key issue of we're seeing our impressions um, go down or decline in our Instagram posts. Okay, what's not in our control around this? Well, we can't control the algorithm. That's so let's not even talk about it.
Yeah,
Not
really.
a
And
not
it
a
changes
possibility.
constantly.
Yeah. And so even when I was in a school, for us to be able to write down all the things, and then we made a master visual of that. And I can remember being in one meeting where one of our paraprofessionals, as the conversation went on, she's the one that jumped in and said, I think we're out of our locus of control right now. And it was because as an organization, we had built the language, and everyone in the room said, you're right. Bring it back.
Mm.
What can we control within our own building? There's a lot that we can, but let's not get focused in on the things that are out of our control.
Gosh, that is so important. How often do we get in a meeting and we go off track talking about things that are outside of our control or outside of our influence? And it just sucks the time, it sucks the energy, and then we become victim mindset focused and
Yeah.
we just sit in this pool of, cynicism. I hate to say it that way, but we can easily be drawn to that by having that one norm, that little piece of structure. It's building the habit of I'm not going to be concerned about that. What can I control? What can I influence personally? And then us as a group, what can we control? What can we influence?
And
Curtis, you are bringing so many tools to the table. I hope everybody is picking them up and putting them in their tool belt. So many things.
And
Um,
Bethany, if we're in a meeting and as a leader, I say to you, I think we're outside of our locus of control right now. If we have no shared language around that, if we have not done some experiential activity around that, you might completely shut down from
mhm,
that conversation. And now I've created a power dynamic between
mhm,
someone who's leading the organization and then another person on the team. But if we've engaged in that, just like the example in my school, a paraprofessional can say, I think we're out of our locus of control, and everyone in the room knows what we mean by that.
mhm.
We have shared experience and shared language that we can do that, and a person, again, is not offended. And again, without the structures and processes in place, that might be a that might be a really courageous person or a courageous thing for a person in a meeting to say, but when we've got the structures, processes, predictability, clarity, it's no, we can say that because no one's going to get offended because we've talked about what's in and outside of our locus of control.
Man, that's amazing. And I love just having the common language. That's something that's so often overlooked. We just assume everybody knows what we mean and our definition. If you look up a word in the dictionary, you're going to get a couple of different, definitions for that one word. And how often at work we just assume that everybody thinks like us and we all think of whatever word that is in a different way. Locus of control, you could be the scientist and you're thinking of the science experiment and all these things. And then I could be sitting there and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, a locus of control, and be completely ignorant. So establish it up front. It's so good. So as we look at, okay, we've talked about the leader's role. We've talked about cultivating and providing the structure, and then, how we're actually responding to things, focusing on what's most important, focusing on the key issues, the locus of control. Now let's talk about sustaining this because
Yeah.
teams change all the time. You have new people come in, you have people leave, retire, whatever it is. So you're constantly having changing teams. How do you keep that? How do you sustain the collaboration over time?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things that go along with this, Bethany. I think the first one is documentation. So, for instance, I've talked about working with schools where there's a poster that's in the school of these are different types of meetings, its purpose, who's involved, when do they happen. Having that really clearly laid out becomes a little bit of the organizational wisdom or knowledge that we
Mhm.
establish. I think I often talk about when we think of onboarding new team members, we want to be able to think about what do they need to know, when do they need to know it, and who's the best person to help share that with them. And again, I would, as a leadership team, start writing it down. You talked about systems before. We create systems for everything that we're doing in our organization. So let's write down all the things that people need to know. And usually, when they're coming into a new organization, there's a lot, which is why
Mhm.
then when? When would they need to know it? Do they need it before they walk in the door the first day? Do they need it by the end of the first month? Is this something that maybe in the third month we could look at and getting really clear? And then who? Who's the best person? And this helps us move away from the I'm going to onboard a new person with a 2 full days of training with this one person locked away in a room. No,
Mhm.
let's try and decide who's the right person at the right time and try and create networks already within the
Mhm.
organization. Within our own organization, when we bring in new people, there's different team members that are onboarding in different elements to start creating relational connections between them. And then I'm a big believer that you continually repeat purpose and why over and over again. We actually, in our own team, just recently had said, I don't think we need to review the norms every time that we meet. And I said, okay, I agree with that. But every second month, we're going to still pick one because we just want to keep that so that we're used to it, that when a new team member does join, it doesn't feel out of ordinary or doesn't seem out of step
Yeah.
for us. So again, when we're meeting, taking that 28 seconds to just okay, remember guys, the purpose of this team is X. Any questions or comments or like let's just keep repeating these things over and over and over. I've sometimes work in schools, and I know this is true in any organization, where a leader will say, I don't know why this is happening. I told them what they're supposed to do. And then when you ask the question, when and how often? Well, it was a
Uh-huh.
staff meeting near the start of the year. I made it crystal clear.
Yeah.
Was it possible not everyone was in the room at that time? Was it
Mhm.
possible someone was thinking about something else?
Mhm.
I think you
Yeah.
need to say it more times over and over and over again.
Can I add this a personal touch to this? When you are parenting your children, how many times have I told you? Well,
Yeah.
you weren't in the same room. You were talking to them from a different room. Maybe they were watching TV or on their phone, so you didn't actually have, their attention. There's so many things at play. And then even if you do have people's full attention, you still have to repeat it. I think that I've heard the stat anywhere between 7 and 8 times. People have to hear something 7 to 8 times the same
Mhm.
way before they actually hear it. And then after they hear it, they have to understand it and then be able to go to apply it, right? So you're really talking 8 plus because it takes 8 to just hear it.
Yeah. And
So,
then again, being able to build out the systems or documentation. I've worked with organizations where we'll have norms. Let's say there were 5 norms that they establish when they meet as a team. Then we've even talked through, okay, let's write down what does it look like when that, or first, let's write down why is that norm important. So let's use a simple one. Be on time and prepared. I don't
mhm.
think that's an unusual norm for any
Yeah.
team that's meeting. Let's say that out loud. Okay, why? Let's name why this is important. And the why is that everyone's time is honored when we all arrive on time and prepared. Someone who's saying, what's the big deal? I was a couple minutes late. As soon as they hear that why, they go, okay, I hadn't thought about it that way. So let's write it down, name it. Then, what does it look like when we are on time and prepared? Let's write down explicitly. Then, let's write down what does it not look like? And again, doing this together. And then I've even gone with some teams to say, what do we agree to do when someone breaks this norm? It's going to happen. We're human beings. And it, again, I've worked with an organization where it wasn't punitive. The person who was not on time or prepared. In one organization, they set that the response will be always, we'll check and make sure the person's okay. And then they have to bring snacks next time we meet.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's crystal clear.
Yeah.
It's not up to, and I know you've been in situations where we're in a meeting, someone drifts in 5 minutes late, and everyone side eyes the leader to say, is this going to get dealt with? And if
Mm-hmm.
it's not, then why am I showing up on time for
Yes.
these? And then everything starts to deteriorate. Just
Uh-huh.
articulating and creating clarity and predictability is just so important. And this helps sustainability over and over and over again.
It's so good. I love it. Starting with define what good looks like. Like, why are we having this? What does it look like? And then how are we going to have the conversations afterwards? So good. Again, Curtis, you are giving out such leadership truth. If you have a new leader listening, listen to this one episode over and over and over again, and you're going to get such a foundation that's going to help you in every aspect of your leadership. Because again, one of the hardest things you'll ever do is get people together to talk and collaborate and actually work
Mhm.
together. So, Curtis, as we kind of wrap up this episode, you've given us so much, so many good things. What are some key takeaways for our listeners that they need to go and now apply in their leadership?
Okay, I'm going to go right back to where we started is think about what are the banks you need to set. What
Mm,
are the structures and processes that you have to put in place? And being as a leader, I'm not going to waver from that. We are going to have norms, even when someone rolls their eyes that, oh, we have to have norms for this team. Yeah, we do.
mhm,
We need to have them in place. I think that's one of the key takeaways is knowing what are those structures and processes that I have to have in place and then setting
mhm.
them up. It sometimes can feel like a bit of front loading work, but it pays off tenfold long term. I go back to your statement right at the start of moving from me to we. I think understanding that you're not the smartest person in the room. The room is so, and side note on this, Bethany, I started as a principal in a school in after a year and a half, or sorry, as an assistant principal after a year and a half of teaching experience, just by the nature of the school and the setting that I was in. I was principal within 4. So
Oh,
when I
wow.
became a principal, virtually every person on staff was older than myself. So creating the power dynamics of I'm in this chair, therefore I must have these all of these solutions
Mhm.
wasn't possible. It was an early wake up that harness the power of the room. That's your job. So
Oh,
I think that's a key takeaway is how do you honor the exceptional expertise that's in the room because the room is smarter than you are.
it's so good. And it also gives me a sigh of relief. I don't have to know it all. The room is
No.
smarter than I am. It's so good.
Oh, and when you can get to a place, and sometimes it takes a lot of years of experience to realize I know less now than I thought I
Mhm,
did 30 years ago.
mhm.
Um, how do I leverage the power of this room? That's where the magic is.
That's so good. All right, you've given us just such great, not just advice, but tools that we need to apply immediately. But now let's go the opposite. What is one poor decision that you would warn our leaders to avoid? Like, leader, don't do this one thing. Come on, you're better than that. What's the one poor decision?
This one's easy because I did it and learned the lesson of you don't lead with your door closed. And what I
Mm,
mean by that is you can't be the one that is going behind the door and setting all of the direction and pieces for us. I live by a principle of ready, fire, aim. And the idea is, yep, there's things you have to ready and get in place and then fire. Fire,
mm,
put it out there. Don't try and get perfection in the planning because as people engage and work, we're going to fail at different points in time. And that's okay because we're going to learn. We're going to aim as we go along and understand that this work is messy, and that when we have tension or conflict that happens, that's not always a bad thing. We just need to create the conditions that allow us to remain intact psychologically, to feel psychologically safe to engage in a messy process. So that's my don't do. Don't worry about being perfect. Um,
oh, so good.
Worry about being a human who cares about other people and understands that there's so much capacity in the room. How do we unlock it?
That's so good. Thank you, Curtis. And where can our listeners go to learn more about you, your work, and just the collaborative response in general?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, jigsawlearning.ca, that's .ca, we're a Canadian organization, you'll see everything. We have a loads of materials, contact information. If you follow Jigsaw Learning on any of the socials, we're there. We have a newsletter that goes out every week. That's at jlinsiders.com that you can sign up. My wonderful wife Lorna and I, every week, we send out a video to that group with some nugget, some idea, thought that we've had, or question that's come up, as well as other resources that are shared out. And yeah, reach out for a conversation. I'd love to be able to chat. I've had an opportunity to learn a lot about how to collaborate effectively, and a lot of the lessons learned were from mistakes made. So
I
lots of
understand
lived
that.
experience.
Lots of limps and scars on this side of the mic. And
Mhm.
guys, you really do want to be a part of his newsletter weekly. I mean, such wisdom. Think about what you've just heard in this podcast that is going to absolutely change the trajectory of how you lead and how you lead well. And so you definitely want to get in on those insights. So, Curtis, thank you so
And
much for being here and sharing your wisdom. It's just been such a great time.
thanks, Bethany. And I would suggest for the podcast audience out there, we also have a podcast. Bethany's going to be a guest on that as well. It's Building a Culture of Collaboration. So search that out. We'd love to have you come and listen more as we talk to other experts around building robust cultures of collaboration. So that's Building a Culture of Collaboration.
Nice. And then all the links will be in the show notes. So you can just click there and definitely connect with them. All right, Curtis, thank you so much for being here. And guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 and 10. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up.